Good morning, YouTube. I want to do a quick video this morning. It's Tuesday morning, and I want to take an opportunity to do a quick video on a channel update, as well as talk about one simple prep we can start immediately without any additional cost. What have I been doing the last week? Well, I have had the food dehydrator and the food saver working overtime the last week. I went to the farmer's market and bought a ton of produce, and not really a ton, 20 or 30 pounds of produce. I'll be honest and say I was a little disappointed. I had expected to save some money by going to the farmer's market. I paid about $1.50 a pound for tomatoes, which is about what they would cost if I went to the local store here with them in season and bought them. Now the difference is that I was able to buy tomatoes that were vine ripened from a local farmer, and not something that was, grown in El Salvador and then ripened with chemicals while it sat in a container for the last 3 weeks on its way to my local store. So a significantly higher quality product, but I was also looking to save some money, and I'm not sure I really did that. I'm not sure it didn't cost me about what it would have cost me if I had just gone down to the store and bought them. Higher quality product, no real money savings. Now what I'm going to try to do is make contact with some of these farmers and back that process up some. Maybe buy direct from their farm rather than wait until they get to the farmer's market. The closer I can get to the source of where that was grown, the cheaper those products should become. It's simple economics. The less money they have to invest to get the product delivered to me, the less they should be able to sell that product to me for. Now, obviously, when stuff starts coming out of the garden, the stuff grown in my own garden will be cheaper than I can go and get it at the store, or else I probably wouldn't be, doing that, except just out of a self-reliance sense, because someday the stuff that's in those stores is not going to be available. But that's what I've been working on. I also pulled out some old preps, some stuff I've had put away for several years, back when I was just getting started prepping, maybe most of a decade ago, 8 or 9 years probably, when I really didn't know what I was doing. And I put away some rice and beans, and literally what I did was take an unscented trash sack and put it in a 5-gallon bucket, fill that trash sack up with beans, and I think I got 30 pounds of beans in one bucket and right at 50 pounds of rice in another bucket, and just twist them up in the sack and then put the lid back on the bucket. Now I opened those buckets, and there's no mold, there's no moisture, they smell fine, there's no bugs in them. So what I'm going to do is sometime in the next week is cook some of that up and just see how it tastes. If it still tastes alright, I know it looks alright, it's visually okay. If it still tastes alright, I'm going to go ahead and vacuum seal it up. Now when I mark them, I'll take a Sharpie and write on the back of my vacuum packs, and you should too. If you're vacuum sealing stuff, you need to know what's in them and when you did it. When I mark them, I'll actually indicate on there that these were really old preps. Whether I just date them back 7 or 8 years, 8 or 9 years, or just mark on them that I vacuum sealed them on this date, but this was old food when I vacuum sealed it, so that we can use that either very early on, or try to avoid using it altogether unless we just absolutely cannot avoid it. So anyway, that's what I've been up to the last week. Got the food dehydrator and the vacuum sealer working overtime. Now I got a PM from a guy that said, basically said, when do you know someone's a prepper? When do you consider someone to be a prepper? So I wanted to answer that. I really consider someone to be a prepper when they develop the mindset of a prepper. What do I mean? Well, preppers see the world in a different way than non-preppers. There may be a reason that you can't immediately begin purchasing guns and ammo, and there are financial constraints. Now, I am of the belief that there's something you can do every day without spending a ton of money to prep, and I do my best to do that. Every day I try to do something, even if it's just throwing a $1 sack of peas in the food dehydrator and letting those dehydrate overnight so I can get them packed up the next day. I try to do something every day. But there could be a reason that you could not begin immediately purchasing supplies and et cetera, et cetera. But if you've adopted the mentality of a prepper, I believe that makes you a prepper. Why? Well, because once you've truly adopted the mentality of a prepper, you will begin prepping. And I've recorded this video a couple of times already because I haven't been able to get it in under 15 minutes. But part of what I've struggled with is answering this question, and the best analogy I came up with was this. The average individual out there in the world is standing on the railroad tracks of life, and what they don't understand is that there's a locomotive barreling down the tracks heading right for us. Whether you want to talk about the impending economic collapse, whether you want to talk about food shortages, whether you want to talk, whatever it is that motivates you to be a prepper, the average individual does not see those things or ignores those things and doesn't realize that's a locomotive barreling down the railroad tracks, and they're standing on the railroad tracks. We as preppers see that locomotive coming, whatever that locomotive may be. Whether it's the 915 out of Yuma or the 712 out of New York. We may prep for different reasons, but we all see the locomotive coming at us. And once you understand, and that's why I say the mindset of a prepper. Once you understand that there's a locomotive hurtling down the train tracks, that you will begin prepping. You may not be able to do it fast. You may not be able to do it the way you want to do it, but you will begin doing something to get yourself off those railroad tracks. Unless you've got sadomasochistic tendencies of some sort, and want to see the whole world die and you too, blah, 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 you're going to start prepping, period. So I really think the answer to that question is, when you develop the mindset of a prepper, I consider you a prepper. Man, I hope that answers your question, because I'm going to move on, and if it doesn't, shoot me another PM, and we'll talk about it more. Now, I promised you one simple prep, and I'm going to go further than that. I'm going to say one simple prep that will cost you nothing more than you were spending today. How you like that? We all know that there are costs associated with being a prepper, period. If I'm going to put away a year's worth of food, I got to buy a year's worth of food. So there are just costs associated with this one. This one's super simple, and you can do it without any additional cost. And what is it? Well, how about just putting gas in your car? Now you're sitting there thinking, well, I put gas in my car. Yeah, I understand, but how often do you put gas in your car? Do you make sure that your car is filled up all the time? Are you one of those people who uses the little yellow light on your dash that comes on, looks like a little gas tank, that says, hey, you know what, you're a half a gallon below empty, you should really stop like in the next 5 miles or else? Do you use that as your fuel gauge? Because that's not what I'm talking about. That's not what I'm talking about, putting gas in your car. I used to be an individual who would let my fuel tank get down to below a quarter of a tank of gas before I would stop and get gas. And then one day I got to thinking about, my wife asked me, she said something about, well, what if you were at work and needed gas getting home and you couldn't get gas for whatever reason? I think at the time there was a issue with our bank account. We had a account frozen or something, and the question was, well, what if you need to get gas and your credit card doesn't work when you leave the office? You can't get gas, and that was a valid concern at that point. But the bigger concern is, what happens if none of us can get gas? What happens if vehicles are still working? You still have a car, whatever it is that the SHTF has hit the fan, but for some reason communications networks are down. And when you pull into the gas station and you swipe your card, it goes, sorry, can't communicate with the bank, you can't get gas here today. And you walk inside and you go, oh man, my card doesn't work, here's a $20 bill, let me get $20 for the gas. And the guy goes, well, because of the communication situation, I can't even turn the pumps on. Really? Could that happen? Yeah, absolutely it could happen. And what happens if your setting on, the little yellow light on your dashboard is on, and you need to get home or get to your bug out location or get to whatever, and you realize, oh my God, now instead of driving the 40 miles from my office to my home, I've got to hoof it for 40 miles. Now, I don't know about the average individual, but I would say, based on the statistics of overweight and out-of-shape individuals in this country, the average individual is not going to make a 40-mile trip very easily on their feet. I fall into that situation these days. I'm working. It's one of my big preps I'm working on right now is getting healthier, getting some of the excess weight off, because, if I had to walk the full 40 miles, for whatever reason, maybe it's an EMP and vehicles are not working, wow, that's going to be a disaster. But if I have put myself in a position because I simply did not stop and get fuel, then I'm an idiot. I mean, I'll just be real honest. Any day that I come to work and I'm below a half a tank of gas, I'm an idiot. So my encouragement here is, if you're looking for an easy prep to start making, and you're not already making sure your gas tank is topped off all the time, just stop and get gas more often. It's not going to cost you anything more. You were going to get gas anyway. Just stop a little more frequently. Instead of stopping once a week, stop 3 times a week. If you're like me, and because I've got an 80-mile-a-day commute, I have to stop and get gas every 4th day anyway. Maybe I have to stop and get gas every day during the week. But it is worth it to know that when I go get into my car and I'm fighting this sort of traffic like we're seeing on the screen, when I'm fighting this sort of traffic, trying to get home, that as long as that traffic is moving, my car's got about a 350-mile range on it, I'm going to make it. I've got the fuel in my tank. I'm not going to be one of the 10% of all vehicles on the road at any given time need gas. Well, guess what? I'm not going to be among that 10%. When they die and when their cars die and they have to push their car off the side of the road, I'm going to be able to go on up the road and go, thank you that I am not in that position. So guys, there's something really simple you can do immediately. Won't cost you anything extra. Just stop and fill up with gas a little more frequently. Alright guys, well I hope this has been helpful. Like I said, I've got a couple other videos coming up pretty quickly. At least I hope, if I can get some time to get them done. So, this is Arky Prepper out saying keep your head high and your powder dry. Thanks.